If you don't have a total station to accurately measure your sensor locations, the location engine has a handy tool called the Survey Point Finder that can help you determine the locations of your sensors or tags with a fairly decent accuracy. The general idea is that if you know 2 points within your space, you can easily determine an unknown point, like a sensor for example. Let's use the following example, assuming that I just finished mounting my sensors and I do not know the coordinates of any of my sensors. I've chosen 2 points, P1 and P2, which are on top of my conference room table. It is a good idea to put a piece of tape or sticky note at each location with a label on it so you remember where the points are. I need to determine the XYZ coordinate for each point, so I'll simply use a laser measurer and take offsets from the walls as shown. Note the origin is in the upper left corner. The table itself is 0.78 meters high, so that will be the Z coordinate for each point. After taking the offset measurements, we now have the coordinates for both points and can go into the location engine to use the Survey Point Finder. The first thing we want to do is load our area. Under Map, Load Area, and mine is called My Room. Next we want to open up the Survey Point Finder, which is also under the Map menu under Add Survey Points. I'm going to move it over to the left a little bit so you can see what goes on as we add the points. So now we need to enter P1 and P2 as survey points. So the first thing I'm going to do is click into Candidate 1 because it happens to be selected. You could also use Candidate 2 by simply clicking the radio button, but we're going to stick with Candidate 1. Doesn't matter which one you use. So I'm going to type in the XYZ coordinate of P1. And as you can see, it's actually showing up on the map. The next thing we need to do is create a group which will store these points. I'm going to name it Survey Points. And we actually need to give a label to this particular point, which we will call P1. Then click the Add Survey Point. The survey point has been added. We will repeat this process for Survey Point 2. And we will call it P2. At this point, you now have access to the survey points from the drop-down menus at the top. These are the 2 points that you're going to use to determine an unknown point. So first we need to select Survey Points, and then Point 1, and then Survey Points, and Point 2. Let's use the following example to explain how to use the Survey Point Finder. Let's say I don't know the coordinates of sensor 1E, EF. What I need to do is use a laser measurer and measure the distance from P1 to the face of the sensor and also the distance from P2 to the face of the sensor. When measuring these distances, make sure to aim for the fiducial mark which is on the face of the sensor. It looks like a target symbol. Going back to the Survey Point Finder, we now need to enter in the measurements that we measured from P1 and P2. In my case, the distance from P1 to the sensor was 2.576 meters, and the distance from P2 to the sensor was 3.231 meters. In the height box, you need to put the height of the unknown object. In this case, it's the sensor. My sensor is 2.37 meters off the ground. What you now see are 2 points that the Survey Point Finder calculates, and you have to decide which one is correct. Right now, Candidate 1 is selected, so it shows up as red on the screen. If I were to select Candidate 2, it will change red, and it's clear that Candidate 2 is not the correct coordinate. So now we will go back and select Candidate 1. At this point, I'm going to create another group to store my sensor coordinates. I'm going to simply call it Sensors. And I'm going to name this one after the MAC address of the particular sensor. In my case, it's 1E, EF. And click Add Survey Point. Now you simply repeat this process for all the sensors in your area. The last thing I want to mention is that this tool is also very handy for determining calibration points. Let's say it's time to calibrate and you place your tag in the middle of this space. You will have to know the XYZ coordinate of the tag during the calibration procedure. What we can do is select two sensors to determine this tag point. I've selected sensor 1E, EF, and 1724, which are the upper sensors seen in this picture. What I do is then use my laser measure and measure the distance from the tag to each sensor. So the distance from my tag to sensor 1E, EF happens to be 3.18 meters, and the distance from my tag to sensor 1724 happens to be 3.25 meters. And my tag is 0.78 meters off the ground. So now what I can do is create a new survey point group, and I'll call it calibration points, and I will name this point point 1. When it comes time to calibrate, the calibration wizard will allow you to select this point.